Call the meeting the order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us this evening and all those who are at home watching us. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. At this time, I'd like to introduce Reverend Patricia Smith, pastor at St. Andrew's AME Zion Church, for the invocation, and ask that everyone stand and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend, welcome.
Good evening. Let us pray. Most holy and all-wise God, we come now once again in the name of Jesus. We come, Lord, thanking you and praising you for this day, O Lord, how you gathered us together once again to come about the business of this city. Lord, we pray for all the council members and all that are gathered here. We pray, Lord, that your spirit would be in this place. Lord, give them wisdom to know how to lead the city. Give them courage to lead the city. And give us courage, O Lord, to be the citizens that you called us all out to be. Lord, we thank you for all that's going to transpire in this place on this day. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one presentation this evening. Our first presentation is a proclamation naming March the 17th, 2023 as North Carolina Arbor Day. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Aaron Reese, who is our forestry manager supervisor, if he would join me at the front. City of Wilmington, North Carolina, the proclamation reads, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Bill Sappho, Mayor of the City of Wilmington, and the entire Wilmington City Council do hereby declare March the 17th, 2023 as Arbor Day in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina. And I've been asked to make a notation. Amy Beatty, our Parks and Rec director, has asked me to say that on March the 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day, there will be a planting at 1:30 at Snipes Academy, and I would urge everyone to come. If you haven't seen it, it's a phenomenal time. It's one of the funnest times I have as mayor, is to watch those big trees being planted and watch all those kids screaming and yelling and just enjoying themselves. But Aaron, I want to say thank you to you and your staff for all the work that you do in not only planting trees, but also taking care of the tree canopy that we have here in the city of Wilmington. And I will have the opportunity on Saturday to be at a tree giveaway at the Greenfield Lake Amphitheater, and I gave away 350 trees, I believe, within 10 minutes. It was incredible how many people come out to get them, but every time we have a tree giveaway, and I want to thank the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees, our tree commission, and all the people that work diligently every day to try to make this a more beautiful place, and just say thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Congratulations. So they're going to make me work a little bit harder this evening. Since we do not have an electronic voting this evening, we will be doing everything old-fashioned way. From 20 years ago, we'll be going with a voice vote of yes or no. And please raise your hand depending on how you want to vote, okay? So that brings us to our next item of business, which is our consent agenda. Items 1 through 2. What are the wishes of council in respect to the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Our next item of business is our public information. There is no public information speakers that have been scheduled to speak this evening, so we'll move on to public hearings. Item PH1 is a public hearing, Home ARPA Allocation Plan. This is a public hearing only. No action will be taken at this time, as it is only a hearing. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community Development and Housing Planner Suzanne Rogers will overview this item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Caudill, Mayor Saffo, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. As the mayor said, tonight is the public hearing for the Home American Rescue Plan Allocation Plan, which will be submitted to HUD by March 30th. The final plan will be presented to you at your next City Council meeting. As part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the Department of Housing and Urban Development was allocated $4.925 billion in supplemental ARPA funds through the Home Investment Partnership Program, known as HOME, to support communities throughout the country to address homelessness. And that's how we have the Home ARPA funds, the name of this program. The City of Wilmington was awarded $2,513,506 in ARPA funds to assist with what's described in the Home ARPA guidelines as qualifying populations. So the qualifying populations are homeless, including sheltered in emergency and transitional housing, and unsheltered persons experiencing homelessness, including chronically homeless. Those are disabled and folks who've experienced homeless for a long period of time. Also qualifying population, those at risk of homeless, primarily folks with very low incomes and severe housing cost burden or other low incomes and housing instability. And more information can be found on this definition at 24 CFR 91.5. Those fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking are also qualifying populations. Other populations include persons or families requiring services or housing assistance to prevent homelessness, such as rental assistance or utility assistance, and veterans and families that include a veteran that meet one of those criteria are also qualifying populations. The HUD Home ARPA guidelines also identify eligible activities that the funding can be used for. A little more detail, the funding can be used for rental assistance for up to 24 months, housing counseling, group or one-on-one, homeless prevention services, including but not limited to things like child care, job training, case management, temporary assistance for moving cost deposits, things like that, often called rapid rehousing, the development of affordable rental housing, the development of permanent supportive housing, that's housing for chronically homeless, the preservation and rehabilitation of vacant single-family or multifamily buildings for affordable rental, including permanent supportive, and the acquisition or production of non-congregate shelter. It's also required in this allocation plan was that we consult with homeless service and shelter providers. And so we did this in a number of ways. One way was that we attended standing meetings, presented information about the Home ARPA program, and were available for questions and answers. And these are the meetings that we attended. the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, the Joint Community Relations Advisory Committee, and the Cape Fear Homeless Continuum of Care. Combined, there were 69 individuals in attendance at those meetings, representing 34 different agencies, churches, businesses, et cetera. We also conducted stakeholder interviews with homeless service providers from 12 different agencies and organizations, and also interviewed 4 persons experiencing homelessness. In addition, we issued surveys through the city's website to the homeless shelter and service providers, and a citywide survey as well. Some of the things that we heard in the consultation with various providers, we asked them what they thought were unmet needs and gaps. And here's a list: security deposits, mental health and case management, easy access to food, water, and other basic resources, easily accessed emergency shelter with low barriers, more emergency shelter, day shelter in the downtown area, substance abuse treatment, emergency shelter specifically for families, LGBTQ+, elderly and disabled, more street outreach, wet shelter, and permanent supportive housing. We asked them what they felt the barriers were to achieving the eligible activities. And this is, of course, the summation of the list of things that they gave us: land, the cost of land, a lack of focus on long-term solutions, gentrification, funding for permanent supportive housing, mental health, and housing for chronically homeless persons who are involved with caseworkers. And finally, we asked them how local government can help. I'm sure you're not surprised, this is a long list. Provide land, provide gap financing, support the conversion of commercial property to residential, provide land zoned for non-congregate low-barrier emergency shelter, understand housing as health care, consider that people are moving away because they can't find affordable housing, talk to and listen to homeless shelter and service providers, have services for homeless camps, look at the root cause, learn more about poverty, and use data and understand data when making decisions. We asked them of the eligible activities to tell us what their top priority would be. And you can see on this chart, the development of permanent supportive housing received 50%, followed by affordable housing, preserving housing, and rental assistance. We were required in the home guidelines, following their template, to do an assessment and gap analysis. So this table was developed using the January 26, 2022 point in time data that was reported to HUD for the Cape Fear Regional COC. Point in time is a snapshot in time, and it should not be considered a full indicator of homelessness. That said, we can see on that particular night that there was a need for 17 additional emergency shelter beds. This does not represent the need for all persons experiencing homelessness only that night. Recognizing the limitations of the point-in-time data, we asked the Cape Fear Homeless Continuum to provide additional data provided through their Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. HMIS is used by many, but not all, homeless shelter and service providers. It captures data on each unique individual utilizing shelter and services. Looking at the individuals captured, 1,211 were assessed as high priority, meaning that they were unlikely to self-resolve their homelessness or risk of homelessness. 325 were entered into the system and remained unsheltered. So we're looking at a gap of, at risk of homeless or homeless of 1,536. You can see here also the number of folks, total 936, who did access services, housing services, shelter services. We also looked at the rental units available and who was residing in those to identify the gap in rental units using census data and comprehensive housing assessment data provided by HUD. We have a total of 29,067 rental units. 3,164 are affordable to those at the lowest incomes, 30% AMI and below. There are 6,740 renter households in that income range who have severe housing problems, severe housing cost burden being one of those. So that leaves us a gap of 3,576 units of affordable rental needed for that at-risk population. So that's, this lines up with the information from the Bowen report that was also included in the plan, looking at about 1,600 affordable rental units needed for households that are at 30% AMI or below. So over a 2-year period, that would be consistent with the CHAZ data. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that data, if you can.
You have any questions?
I had a question. Suzanne, of the 29,067 total rental units, that's what we have in the area in totality?
In the city of Wilmington, based on the census data for 2020, I'm sure that's changed a little bit, but yes.
But do we not have the data for how much is available or how much is taken up, or am I just not looking at this correctly?
Oh, like a vacancy rate?
Right.
That data is available in the census and in other data collections, and the Bowen report also spoke to that. We have a very low vacancy rate or a high occupancy rate. I believe our occupancy rate is between 95 and 97% in Wilmington generally.
Gotcha. And so of this 29,000, we have 3,000 that are at the 30% AMI.
That are affordable to people who make that low income.
Okay, and then 10,000 of that number is for people who are at 50% AMI.
Yes.
But none from 0 to 30%? Is that what we're saying here?
Well, I'm sorry, the units affordable to 0 to 30% would be the 3,164. Although they probably wouldn't be affordable to people at 0%.
Okay, and then 30 to 50 is?
And then 50, 30 to 50, yeah, is the next cell.
But in the first column, those two blocks are grayed out.
Yes, we're not, this is just a format that they provided us. So the next 2 rows are the renter households.
Oh.
The first 2 rows are the units, and so that's why those are grayed out.
Well, still at the top it says the level of need, so you would think that they don't exist, right?
Well, the 6,740 are the number of households that need those 3,164 units. So that's the gap. 3,576 people need housing that doesn't exist.
Okay.
That's essentially how I interpret this, kind of on the bottom line.
I'll take
Is
your
that
word.
helpful?
I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Waddell?
Suzanne, I see we're proposing to allocate the vast majority of this funding, 84% of it, about 2.1 million, a little over 2.1 million of this funding to permanent supportive housing without any real look or allocation to emergency shelter needs, rapid rehousing programs, more funding for those fleeing domestic violence, and any sort of mention of addressing root cause, the majority of homelessness, substance abuse, mental health disorder. I mean, it's all the eggs in one basket, as it were. What is the reason for that?
Sure. So, one, the priorities of the actual providers that we spoke to. The second being that these are one-time funds, so investing them in a capital project and leveraging additional funds to create at least 66 units of permanent supportive housing is consistent with the use of other ARPA funds that we know we won't have again, and many of those supportive services and rental assistance are ongoing types of expenses, and these funds will not be here again, at least for in this form. Hopefully, we don't have another emergency that causes the need for these kinds of funds on a national level. We also recognize that creating permanent supportive housing actually does free up beds in emergency shelter. So,
What kind of data do we have to support that statement? Because I read it often, but it's never followed up with any sort of data. And the data that I end up, this is an interesting topic because it's something that affects our community in a deep way. And so trying to take a holistic approach, I think, is important. So what data do we have? And we don't have to answer that now, but before we actually take a vote, I think it is important and to this body to be able to hear what kind of data we have to actually support that fact that it does in fact open up emergency shelter and maybe not prohibit emergency shelter from actually being open. I'll be happy to share some of the data that I have that shows exactly that.
okay, thank you. I would appreciate that. That would be useful. We've also recommended designating $350,000 for supportive services, the type of things that you mentioned, and $50,000 for capacity building. I think recognizing the need for better data collection to really be able to understand what's going on better than we do now with the existing HMIS data.
So what we're doing, we're going to take the opportunity to do something that is permanent, that is sustainable, versus spending a lot on something that we're going to take care of it in budgets, nonprofits, shelters, what have you. Is that a fair statement? With the 66 units, that's something that'll stay. I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
it's not fleeting, and we're going to take the opportunity with this money to put that in those 66 units, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's part of the thinking here. And
This number, if you could, well, it just disappeared. Can you go back to that 3576 or whatever it is, that gap? The last time, this is based on 2020 census.
yes, sir.
The last time that these numbers and this grid was put together, what was that number? Do you remember that?
I have not, no, sir, I don't. I haven't put this exact grid together.
Okay.
We could pull,
No, it's not
Census data
necessary.
from the past.
It's a moot point. But the reason I ask that is, are we gaining or what have you? And my other question is, you can come back to that, but my other question is, this is something that is not unique to Wilmington. That's, everybody knows that. But in your circle of where the people that you deal with, not just here but everywhere, are you seeing some rather unique things being done other than just, I mean, the cure to the problem would be us just to put a bunch of money in it and build houses for everybody, and that's probably not going to happen because we don't have the money. Are you seeing some things, and I'm sure if you did, you'd be sharing them with us, but some things that are out there that people are doing to try to reduce that number? I mean, when you look up there at the total rental units, I mean, I get as many calls about people wanting us to control rents and doing stuff like that, that's not our shtick. We can't do that. So that total number of units, I would be willing to bet that 95 to 97% occupancy rate might be higher than that. They're just not there, not just for this group of people, but for everybody.
Yes, sir. And again, referencing the Bowen report and other information that we all hear on a regular basis, we know that housing for those at the lowest income is the most difficult housing to provide, and the housing that most likely will not be provided without some sort of a public intervention like this. So the market just is not able to provide this housing with those kind of services. We have, in our own community, seen success with permanent supportive housing with Lakeside Reserve and Ashley, and you all approved funding for Driftwood to bring that back online. So, you know, if you look at that point in time count, just that one night of all the unsheltered folks, 92 of those folks were chronically homeless. 73 of those were unsheltered. And of all the homeless folks counted just that one night, which is again just a snapshot, but over half of them were chronically homeless. So that's the population that requires the most attention and service, and if we can get them permanently housed, the emergency shelter and other service providers are able to, it's my understanding from talking with them, able to help other people resolve their housing issues in a shorter fashion and effectively, and not see as much recidivism among that group.
Well, going back to that list of the things that people mentioned that were their list of things that, if you could go back to that, right there, provide developable land. I don't know if it's the top because that was the number one thing they were talking about, or just that's where it ended up. But you know, we have a real problem here because we don't have any land. And the land is in Brunswick and Pender counties. And they don't have the cities there that provide the services that we do, so it's kind of it's a catch-22. I think this council and the councils before this that I've served on have always shown a willingness to provide some of the other things that our new land development code. We're encouraging our developers to provide, you know, housing at 80 and 60 AMI, gap financing that this council and the county and the state stepped up to the plate on. But I don't know. I remember going out to the county office when we were first doing that affordable housing thing that I felt real cool about, and it was going to happen, and it hadn't. We were talking about, you know, 10 to 13,000, or I forget, it was some large number of units that we were short on. And I mean, and 66 is a great number, but, you know, I'll be pushing up daisies at Bellevue Cemetery, you know, before we get anywhere near there, and then the problem's going to continue to exacerbate. So we do the best we can, and I'm glad for this to come along. And like you, I don't want another pandemic to come along to generate it again, but you know, we've got to do something drastic. And I don't know what that is, but we've got to do something drastic to get these people sheltered. Praise God for the Good Shepherd and the shelters that do those things, because without them, I don't know where we would be or where they would be.
Mr. Barnett?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think, too, that as Councilman Robinbach was saying, we have to do something drastic. I think one of the keys is listed on there where we learn more about poverty and who's impacted, and that we have to make sure that all of our citizens recognize that it's not just a them and they, you know, that all of us are struggling in that area. My question for you, though, is In your survey, I think you mentioned you only surveyed 4 homeless persons. To me, that seemed like a very limited number. Can you explain why?
In the stakeholder interviews, those were interviews that I made arrangements with various providers, and I went out and met with them, or sometimes I came to the office and met with them and went through a number of questions. I guess the answer, Reverend Barnett, Councilman Barnett, would just be the limitations of time. Why we didn't have more stakeholder interviews, it was intended to be a sample of those providers
Okay. All right. Thank you.
and homeless individuals.
I just have a follow-up to the discussion before with some larger data points that I think would be important to consider before our next meeting that are germane to discussion with regards to prioritizing or whether or not to prioritize permanent supportive housing over some of the other avenues to recovery and helping people out. And that's that today, right now, San Francisco has the greatest number of permanent supportive housing units per capita of any major city in the United States. It has 11 permanent supportive housing units per 1,000 people, which is nearly 3 times as much as New York City and Chicago, and over 6 times as much as Miami-Dade. With all that, the unsheltered homeless populations of New York City, Chicago, and Miami fell 11, 10, and 50%, respectively, between 2005 and 2020, while San Francisco's rose 95%. These are drastic numbers, and I think it's worthwhile to consider outside-the-box options rather than, housing first sounds great, but it's antiquated, and I think the data shows in no uncertain terms it doesn't work. So I'm certainly committed to assisting in finding a solution, and I'm happy to have conversations with you offline to provide some data points, because I think we need to kind of look at it from every angle, and every dollar that we leverage into the community is important. So.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that. Certainly taken into account.
Suzanne, can you define supportive services for the audience, please? For me and the audience.
Going to the guidelines.
While she's looking.
Apologize.
Oh, did you find it? I guess I can entertain them for a minute while you're looking. But basically, I was going to mention Eden Village, which is one of the projects that not the city, but that is being happening even like right now, where they're taking chronically homeless people and placing them in a home, but they're also providing wraparound services. So services like where they can get mental health and social services. So I think that's something I think that we really need to continue to highlight and let people know about.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think Suzanne's looking for this specific definition of provider services as defined with the ARPA plan as defined by the federal government, but in general, provider services are case management for individuals, mostly chronically homeless, that have mental health issues, addiction issues, other issues that are contributing to their unsheltered condition. So it's providing them with those wraparound services. So that's the general definition, and before we come back to adopt the resolution, we'll be sure to provide you with the definition as defined by the federal government.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, it is a long list of services.
Pull your mic down, Suzanne.
It's a long list of services from A to S. But I will pull this out and send it to you with the definitions.
No, that's fine. I imagine it was wraparound services, but I just thought you might have had a definition handy, so I didn't mean to stump you and cause this long pause for all of us. I knew you knew what supportive services were. I just thought you might have had a ready definition on hand. Thank you.
I was getting into the weeds with you, sorry.
It's okay.
Suzanne, before you come back to the next meeting, and I would like to have the number of units that we as a council have adopted and supported in respect to the different developments where developers have said they would provide a number of units for affordability in the last 2 years, plus the Starway Theater and the amount of money that we have spent, the county spent, and the state has spent in regards to that, and what the percentages are, 30%, 60%, or whatever the number is, because I know there's several hundred there. The units that we just went and broke the ground on out at, in Ogden, I think there was 72 units for seniors. But I would like to see those numbers, because I see you have a number of 3,500, and that was based on a count of 2020. But I want to see from that point forward how many units that we have approved and what the money is that we have spent to date in regards to those numbers.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
And the type of housing?
Please.
Yes, sir.
I think it's very important. I don't think that, you know, obviously if you're not down here every night, if you're not watching us every night, they come here 5%, 10%, 15%, an entire development. In addition to, I know that there's been some significant discussions that will be ongoing in the near future in respect of the redevelopment of Hillcrest. That will also take into account the redevelopment of that with a mix of income, and that would involve 30%, 60%, 80% AMI, and at market rent also. So I know you can't, that's nothing that I'm asking you for, because that's Wilmington Housing Authority, but the ones that we have approved or have been approved, and they should be able to give us that at the, from the planning department. Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
I'll just say, I mean, I assume someone, your department and if your department or planning work together, or whether it's just planning, but it's really, I think, to my memory, the first time we had that conversation was with the Maynard development out on Military Cutoff. That was probably longer than 2 years ago. So I don't know how many, if there's a way to find out the number of units where we're monitoring the 8-year or 10-year or whatever. You know, I don't remember all the
15 to 20.
all the various promises. And Tony, I mean, it just all comes to mind when, where did, you need an answer tonight, but I'd love to know where that ended up. If you remember, it was a pay in lieu. He offered to pay in lieu, or they were going to build the units.
They're building the units.
So they just built the units. So that'd be where it started. And that place has been finished a long time. All right, thank you.
In addition to that, Suzanne, also the number of units I believe that we approved for the fire station, that I believe that we're working with Katrina on Carolina Beach Road, the old fire station, which I know is being converted into supportive housing like we did at Lakeside Reserve, the number of units and the amount of money we'll be spending there. And if we haven't determined that yet, I'm sure that somebody will be asking us for it, so thank you.
And the healing place is taking a lot of people, probably around 160 today. And those are going to be some success stories, getting back out on the street with their life in order and not being homeless, because a lot of those people are unsheltered.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, I will now open up the public hearing and ask if anyone in the public would like to come up and speak.
My name is Belinda Blue, and I'm not sure is this the perfect time to talk about the effects of the high rent on the community?
This is a public hearing. You can say about anything you want as long as it's pertaining to this particular item, ma'am.
Sounds
If you'll bring back down the mic just a little bit so we can hear you clearly.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to give you some scenarios. There's a lot of definitions of homelessness. Homelessness is not just people that's in the shelter or people that's on the street. There are a lot of definitions of homelessness. This young lady, she told me I was able to give her first name, and it's Dawn. And she is an amputee. She lived in this apartment complex 18 years. All of a sudden, they went up on her rent a little over $300. She said, I cannot pay that because it's more than what my Social Security check is. I had to work with her hard to try to find her someplace to live. She ended up having to go into a nursing home. We had to sell everything out of her house to get her into a nursing home. Her sister's house was not handicap accessible, so she couldn't go stay with her sister. It is serious. The way this rent is going so high. I was glad to hear on that rescue plan that she was talking about, you know, the home rescue plan, that there was a mental health component, because this causes mental health. This young lady, I went through the stress right along with her, trying to find her someplace to live, trying to get everything sold out of her house, afraid that that rent that was high was going to hit next month and there wasn't going to be any money to pay that rent. It is very challenging, and it causes mental health issues. My second scenario is senior citizens. We as senior citizens, we're not going to let our families be homeless and out there on the street. And I talk to a lot of my friends, our church members, and they're saying, I've got my son and his family staying here with me. I got this one staying here with me. You go past houses now, and there's 2, 3, 4 cars at that house because people are trying to find some place to live. As senior citizens, I've had to take family members in, and I'm like, when you get 70 years old, you are ready to just sail on in. And you find yourself having to help with the children, having to help do this and do that. It is challenging. After you help that person, another family member be saying, well, oh, you can help me. You can't help everybody. So therefore, there's come division in families. Because you helped that family member, you didn't have this. All of this stuff is homeless. Senior citizens, we are not going to allow our family members to be on the street. So we are taking it. The family that I got, they got out, but I'm so afraid they're going to come back because that $12 and $15 an hour is not going to pay that $1,500 rent. So they've been able to stay to get up enough money to get out, but staying out, I don't see it. My daughter had a tragic thing happen. She's a clinical lab scientist. My grandson went to the doctor to get a flu shot. Well, when he came back, his eyes was blinking. My daughter said, don't, just look. He started having seizures. It's been 2 years with him having seizures. She could not go to work. The doctor told her, do not leave him. Do not let him walk down the stairs. Do not let him get in the tub by himself. She did not work for 2 years. I'm so thankful for the rental assistant program because her rent was $1,500 and she had no way to pay it. My daughter and I tried to get little jobs keeping her car payment and her car insurance paid because there's nothing for that, so that she can have that car if she could ever get to work. It has been 2 years. She has kept her rent. She had just went through a program that they had that helped you buy a house. And they followed her, tracked her for 2 years, and she was just finna go get the house when this stuff hit. COVID hit, and him having to have seizures, and her not being able to work. Now she's seen a therapist, he's seen a therapist. She has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress because going to people to ask for money for rent, going to ask for electric bill, the child passing out, post-traumatic stress. So that's why I'm saying the mental health component, I was very glad to hear the mental health component added in there. I wanted to present some scenarios because if a person, the family staying with me, they're still homeless. They are still homeless, so there's several definitions of being homeless. I'm very thankful because my daughter, it was a machine in the laboratory that she was so good at until the company hired her to work from home to give technical assistance to people at the hospital and different doctors so that she could stay home and take care of my grandson. So it worked out good for her. But I just want you to be sensitive to different scenarios of what's going on out there with the homeless population. Thank you for allowing me to present that to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mayor Saffo, City Council members, I'm Katrina Knight, Executive Director of Good Shepherd Center. We were heartened to read the City of Wilmington's proposed home ARPA allocation plan and support its emphasis on permanent supportive housing. While affordable housing overall is a very real need throughout the city, the need for housing targeted to our most vulnerable neighbors, namely chronically homeless persons with disabilities, is the most serious. The National Alliance to End Homelessness, HUD, and our own local data and experience show substance abuse is not the primary cause of homelessness. Nationally and here in Wilmington, the chief reason that our residents find themselves unhoused is the mismatch between people's income and the income they need to afford and hold on to housing in our very expensive city. Having said that, naturally, persons with disabilities disproportionately experience homelessness as a result of their special needs, combined with often limited ability to earn enough income. To your point, Mr. Waddell, I shared some data with you all a few months back, and we can certainly recirculate it. And one of those charts showed a precipitous drop in chronically homeless persons correlated with the opening of Lakeside Reserve, which many of you have had a chance to visit. And that drop was from 81 chronically homeless persons down to 32 in just over 2 years. So we've seen it here. We have data here and nationally that permanent supportive housing does work. It's not just a drop in persons needing shelter. That's important. We want to free up space for folks who might need it for a period of time. But importantly, it's housing people who never would entertain shelter. And that, of course, that's a really big part of our current conversation right now. How do we help the folks, including the people camping downtown, make a way back to housing? Many of them, because of their special needs or other reasons, are not going to entertain shelter necessarily. Some of them we've been successful in drawing in and shelter being that first step, and others we are moving directly into housing. Permanent supportive housing is that intervention that allows that opportunity, even for very high barrier folks that together we would like to see move off the streets and back into a housing situation. Again, the typical person being housed in permanent supportive housing, they are sometimes coming from shelter, but often coming from our woods, sleeping in their cars, our parks, in encampments. And that's a win for all of us when they make their way back to housing. Permanent supportive housing works all around the country, it works elsewhere, and it is working here. Our residents overwhelmingly do not return to homelessness. They significantly reduce their use of our public services, including the ER and hospital system, and that housing intervention almost immediately results in an improvement in their physical and mental health. Prioritizing permanent supportive housing, like in the draft plan, demonstrates the City of Wilmington's ongoing commitment to funding best practice housing solutions for our chronically homeless neighbors. It makes an end to homelessness possible even for residents with the most significant challenges, including lack of income. If you're doing it right, you're not requiring income at the outset. It also achieves the best and highest use of this one-time funding opportunity. It is one time for as far as we understand at this point. It will be leveraged with public and private investments for the creation of up to 66 units of permanent supportive housing, something that throughout our community, assessment after assessment has shown this is an acute need. We need all kinds of affordable housing, but especially this very targeted type. At Good Shepherd Center, we've seen firsthand both the long-term successes of PSH as a housing solution and the significant improvements it creates in residents' health, overall well-being, and use of public services. Just since February, we have moved 3 of the gentlemen who had been unsheltered and camping downtown out of homelessness and back to housing. That might not seem like a big number, but that is a huge deal, and it is a collaborative effort to be sure, but Good Shepherd has them in housing now. Permanent supportive housing played a role in our ability to make some of those transitions happen. And if we had more of those kinds of units as a community, we could end the homelessness of more of the folks who need it most. Again, it's working, and we need more of it. We're grateful to the City of Wilmington for your ongoing dedication to the creation of housing opportunities, not just for some, but for all of our neighbors across income levels. We appreciate your investment in those best practice solutions. You've invested in permanent supportive housing before. You continue to do so, and we hope you will going forward as well. It works, it's impactful, we need more of it, and we're grateful for your consideration.
Katrina, real quick.
Yes.
How many units did we approve on, at the fire station on Carolina Beach Road? That we haven't.
Right, so the goal is to create 32 there.
32 units.
Lakeside is 40, and those are not the only 40 our community has, but I believe those are probably the newest. So our longest residents there who came from the woods after 8 years, from the streets, have been there for 5 years stably now. The fire station property, we hope, will add another 32 units, again, targeted to chronically homeless persons with disabilities, that hardest to reach group and that hardest to house group. So it's a really impactful and important investment you're making.
Well, thank you for everything you do with Good Shepherd.
Right, thank
You've
you.
made a tremendous impact. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next, please. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sandra Patterson, and right now I live in William Hooper Apartments, which is an income base. My rent has been raised because of my income. Well, with making a little bit more money, I'm facing possibly being evicted. I have to work 60 hours a week just to be able to maintain what I have. And I have children, I have daycare, I have so many other bills to pay. And maybe having to move, I would be looking at paying $1,500, $1,600 in rent, which would be double what I pay now. And I won't be able to afford it. I can't get no type of assistance because I'm over income, because I make $15 an hour, but I have to work 60 hours a week to pay for my car, my daycare, my housing. I don't get food stamps. I have to pay for all of that. I mean, if I have to move out of my apartment because I'm over income for an income-based apartment, me and my family could possibly be homeless. So I may have to move us away from Wilmington. I've been looking at Jacksonville just to have a decent place for me and my family to stay. It's not a fair system to a lot of people like myself. I don't, get a lot of assistance. I'm not living off of the government. I get out there and work, but I have to work 60 hours a week. I'm 5 months pregnant, and I work 60 hours a week to be able to survive, just to maintain, to take care of my family. it's really, really hard. So any help that we can get with housing, anything.
What was the name of the apartment complex?
William Hooper.
Oh, William Hooper, okay.
I live in William Hooper apartment. Right now, my rent is $900.
Okay, and you also have applied for rental assistance with the city
Yes, and I'm
Wait.
always denied.
because your income is too high?
Yes, because I'm over income, because I have to work 60 hours a week. And if I don't do that, I wouldn't be able to feed my family. I don't get no food stamps, no nothing. So, you know, I'm here tonight to hear what I can hear, to see what would be helpful for me and my family. Right now, I'm looking at having to move and pay 15, 16. I see 3 bedrooms, $2,000. It's no way. It's no way I can afford that. I still have car. I have daycare. I pay almost $400 for one child in daycare. $375 a month for one child because of my income. It's just not a fair system. So anything that you could do to help people like myself and others, we would gladly appreciate it. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Suzanne, could you come back up a second? Is Suzanne still here? Yeah.
No, Suzanne?
Yes, sir.
There was a place built called Willow Pond out off of Darlington. And the Catholic Church had something to do with it, and then there was another nonprofit. And their attraction was the fact that one of the reasons why I think a lot of people stay in that kind of housing is because of what that lady is experiencing. They pay a rent, and then when they are fortunate enough to make a little more money, they up the rent. In that particular location, the rent was kind of, I guess you would call it, controlled. And if they made more, they didn't go up on their rent. But they offered credit counseling for the people there, and they set aside some of their money as a down payment 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road on a house. I don't know if that project is still available. I would like to think it is, but it worked. I had a couple of employees that got in there, and they ended up 2 or 3 years down the road owning a home. So that's like being on a trap. You get in there and you're working hard, and you got these bills, and every time you have a little success, it's like inflation. I mean,
Yes, sir.
and the fact that she doesn't qualify for our rental assistance.
We do not have a rental assistance program.
I know.
The county does.
The county, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
If that's the case there, that kind of falls into the same crack. People are working hard, trying to make ends meet, and they can't. They're digging a hole and can't get out of it. I don't know why I asked you up.
Was Willow Pond coming back? Wasn't that one of the projects that you had mentioned?
Willow Pond?
Yeah.
Willow Pond is managed by Wilmington Housing, WHFD Finance and Development. They did many, many years ago have a lease-to-own program. They do not have that now.
WHFD was involved, but I know that St. Mary's Church was heavily involved in the Voice of America. That was the other, it just came to my mind, was the other
Yes, sir.
entity.
I think many years ago, probably over 10 years ago, Voice of America sold that property to what's now Family Promise. They own some units there, and they're used for domestic violence.
Okay.
And other homeless families, or families who are at risk of homelessness.
Because it started in the early 90s.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Suzanne,
thank you.
excuse me, there was a development that was going to be put back into, remember it was the tax credits had expired, Driftwood, I'm sorry. So are there any units in Driftwood right now, or they're all?
Driftwood, we're wrapping up the environmental on that, and we have to post that. It's required by the federal government, and then they will start the rehab of those. Those units are not online yet. But
Do you know when there will be?
I'm not
6
sure
months, 5
exactly
months?
what the timeline is. We think that within the next 60 to 90 days, we'll have all the environmental requirements met in terms of the posting and the release of funds from HUD.
And how many units?
15.
15.
And those
Bill.
are permanent supportive housing units, so they are for chronically homeless.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr.
Yeah.
Barnett, then
Okay,
Mr. Spears.
Suzanne, the last two speakers who spoke, what, you heard their stories. Did anything like jump out at you that would say they could try this, this, or that? And if there's anything that we could help them with, I'd love to see us do that. But just from my knowledge, did any like light bulb come on and say, oh, they made you try this or that to you?
I would recommend that those individuals, and I will speak to them if they're still here,
Good.
make an appointment with the city's housing counseling program. And through that program, the housing counselor can work with them to look at their unique situation, their finances, their budget, and determine some sort of a housing plan for them. Look at credit and any number of things.
Okay, all right, thanks. I just didn't want them to not hear that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you much.
Mr. Spears?
And you can make an appointment online.
Mr. Spears?
Suzanne, Driftwood was a part of WHFD too, right?
Correct.
Right, so yeah, what they were doing, they are no longer doing. Is it safe to say that?
The property was sold.
That property was
Driftwood
sold.
property
The
was sold.
Driftwood property was sold, but it's safe to say that Willow Pond is no longer doing what they used to do.
Willow Pond is still a low-income housing tax credit project.
Okay.
And still subject to the affordability requirements, and is still monitored. So
Okay.
they are still providing housing at the rent rates that is required by that program.
Okay.
Willow Pond, there's a 15-year affordability period, and Driftwood, once they ended their 15-year, they sold it.
Gotcha.
Willow Pond, they received a rehab grant and sort of started that over.
Recently?
Within probably the last 5 years.
Okay.
And the city did invest in that along with others, a major rehab of Willow Pond.
Okay. Thank you.
And how often are these, to your knowledge, these federal programs, you know, when you see rent go up this much and income go up this, you know, it seems to be outpacing income. How often do they update their percentages and variables and percentages of? Is that an annual thing or 5 years or, you know, like she's earning a little bit more money, but all of a sudden she's out of the, it's probably a bad example, but do you know what I'm asking?
Yes, sir. The rents are set every year based on the area median income, and so the tenant would be reevaluated
Annually?
annually or when their lease is up.
Okay. But in relation to the income, so it's all about the income, not, that's what I'm guessing. There's no relation to what's happening in the rents.
No, sir. I'm not familiar with what's happened at William Hooper and why their rents would go up. I know that project has been around for a number of years, so it may be out of its affordability period.
Gotcha.
But I do not know.
That's something that the federal government does
That's part-
annually?
Yes, sir. That's part of the tax credit program.
Okay. I'm going to make sure we're talking about the same thing. All of the Wilmington Housing Authority units, those rents that are upped every year or looked at every year, that's mandated by the federal government because they get federal funds?
I can't speak to the housing authority. I was speaking about the tax credit projects.
Okay. Okay.
say. Thank you. Anybody else? Madam Clerk, have you received any additional comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, we've received quite a few written electronic comments, and I did send these out to council, and we will include those in the record. Sonia Benetton Patrick of 1611 Gander Drive. Liz Carboni from Good Shepherd also submitted comments. Clayton from the City of Wilmington, he worked with the Cape Fear Housing Coalition Group. Brianna, working with, who is a mobile manager for Wave Transit. And we also received a submission from Mr. Tusam. And I did send these to council, and I will include them in the record. Thank you. We had one from Ms. Katrina Knight as well, but she also spoke in person, but we'll still include it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So with that, we will now close the public hearing, and no action will be taken at this time. Okay, so now let's move on to item PH2, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 2.36 acres of land located at 2307, 2311, 2315, and 2317 Market Street from O&I Office and Institutional District and CBCD Community Business Conditional District to O&I CD Office and Institutional District Conditional District for religious assembly use and associated facilities. I will also note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistency statement for the record. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Senior Planner Brian Chambers will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. This site is located on the north side of Market Street between 23rd Street and Kenwood Avenue. It's approximately 2.4 acres in size, includes 4 parcels. One parcel contains an office use. The remaining 3 are vacant. This map provides the context in which the location of the site in the context of the surrounding area. See it just north of Market Street, outside of the 45 corporate limits. We have several photos of the subject site. And then we have several photos of the surrounding properties, as well as the photo in the middle is a photo of Linden Avenue, which is located just north of the site. R10 zoning is located to the north and south. O&I zoning to the west, and community business and O&I is located to the east of the subject property. In 2001, council rezoned a portion of this site along Kenwood to an O&I district for a garden center. And then in 2014, council rezoned the entirety of 2317 to a community business conditional district to allow for additional commercial use of that site. The applicant proposed to rezone the entire property to an office and institutional conditional district for a religious assembly use. The proposal includes a preschool program for a maximum of 20 children and a hospitality cottage for short-term housing for visiting guests. Access will be provided via Linden and Kenwood Avenues. Linden Avenue between 23rd Street and Kenwood would be improved to include 15 feet of pavement width and vertical curb, and that vertical curb is required to prevent folks from parking along that street since it's such a narrow drive. Traffic data indicates that Market Street in this location is operating above its design capacity. This proposal would close several driveways along Market, which will result in a reduction in conflict points and then improving the overall function of the roadway in this area. Market Street is identified as a high-capacity transit route and is also classified as a special character street in this location. Our comprehensive plan calls for infill sites to be developed in a manner that is compatible with existing development. New development within an established neighborhood should address the existing character while also allowing for a transitional change. This proposal would allow for religious assembly use, which are typically located within residential areas, to serve the surrounding community. The proposal will also serve as an appropriate transition between the Market Street corridor and then the surrounding residential neighborhood. Staff believes this request is consistent with our comprehensive plan. The request is reasonable in the public interest and is recommending conditional approval. Subject to those conditions included in the case summary, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this request as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, and the applicant is prepared to make a presentation.
Is there any questions of Mr. Chambers? Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chambers. This time, I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Cindy Wolf, and I've been working with the Wilmington Chabad on this particular project. Chabad Lubavitch is a philosophy, a movement, and an organization. It's considered to be the most dynamic force in Jewish life today. Our local Chabad organization has amassed the subject parcels of land over the last several years with the purpose of constructing a new synagogue and the associated facilities. The property is centrally located in the city and is accessible from the neighborhoods surrounding it. As Brian pointed out, the subject property is already zoned for non-residential uses, but due to the conditional district that was placed on the English Garden parcel, a rezoning is necessary. The upside of this is that the petition will now bring the entire project under the new CD umbrella, which inherently serves to assure mitigation of any impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods. Although the project is not included in any specific area of opportunity on the Creative Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, religious institutions are certainly considered an appropriate community pattern characteristic of traditional urban neighborhoods. This is the plan on the 2.36 acres. It's been designed for up to 30,500 some square feet of gross floor area in the structures. It's a regular campus, if you will. In addition to customary worship and the fellowship activities, again, there are plans for some preschool education during the weekdays. Access is proposed from either Kenwood or Linden Avenue. The currently unimproved Linden roadway will be paved with curbing, and no access is proposed from Market Street. Again, all of those existing curb cuts along Market Street will be abandoned, removed and recurbed, and that will reduce current conflict points around that busy highway. The layout has strived for maximum feasible preservation of the existing trees within the site, and mitigation will be provided for those significant trees that need to be removed for essential site improvements. Street yard, interior parking area, and foundation planting certainly always add to the visual appeal of project grounds. In this particular case, stormwater management is intended to incorporate several typical low-impact design features such as infiltration basins, pervious pavement, and cisterns. This is some of the preliminary architecture. It's certainly a contemporary style, and the frontage of Market Street will meet and exceed those urban frontage requirements that Brian described to enhance the desired character of the city's gateways and edges to neighborhoods. Here's just some other renderings of what it will look like from Market Street, the interior courtyard and the sides of it. With this, we believe that the request is consistent, reasonable, and in the public interest for approval. We appreciate the staff and Planning Commission's positive recommendations. Hope that you will agree. Both the architect and engineer are with me today if there are specific questions that I can't answer.
Are there any questions? Ms. Wolf? Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
Cindy, I was looking at the traffic, and I was kind of surprised that it would play out higher. I guess a lot of that is likely daycare. I mean, not daycare, but preschool.
I'm not positive exactly what you're referring to, but I mean,
The number of trips, peak hour trips, and all that stuff.
Compared to, the interesting thing
about
about
this. It's a plus 105 or something, you know, so is what they're showing, what I see here.
It's an interesting dynamic. When the staff reviews all of this, they have to basically use the criteria of a religious assembly. The interesting dynamic of this, though, is that at a synagogue, of course, their worship day is on Saturday, and from Friday during the Sabbath, they can't use vehicles. So it's all walkable. When there are the most people here at any one time, they've generally walked there. So this specific, we don't believe will impact the traffic numbers as long as it's used as a synagogue. Now, were it at some point way in the future to translate into a different religious assembly, I guess that could be the case.
I guess But I would think some of those numbers are driven by the preschool still. I mean, the morning peak.
Not really. I mean, the preschool with a maximum of 20 kids is really just for religious instruction.
I get that. I'm just
I mean, it's
trying to
not
get the numbers to add up. But what you're
Right.
saying is they're looking at any average religious, assembly hall versus this
That's
particular
correct.
religion. But I guess it also kind of signaled traffic with the curb on the other one. Is that, so we're just worried about parking on that alley or?
Oh, along Linden Avenue, yes. I mean, it's a very narrow avenue as it is. It is used by the woman on the corner of Kenwood, and then there's the rear of the property to the west of us, and one other on the corner of 23rd. They tend to use their backyard as far as their parking area. Otherwise, the only other parcel that accesses Linden is in fact under the ownership of the Chabad, but it will remain residential.
But the curbing there is just precaution. I mean, you just kind of.
That's correct. It's just, there would have been curbing no matter what, but generally there'd be valley gutter. And in this particular case, they're going to use the stand-up, the type A curbing,
Okay.
so that people can't park along that very narrow area.
Okay. My last question is really, I guess, in when you read, like Brian said, I believe, existing character and so forth of the neighborhood, was there any consideration given to the architectural fiber of the neighborhood when it was designed, or we just designed what we wanted?
In a situation like this.
Because it appears the latter. So I was just,
Well, I mean, there's a combination of new homes coming up around the neighborhood. It is on Market Street. It is a combined campus, and there's a lot of existing trees that are going to be preserved. So yes, I mean, I understand what you're saying. This is more of a contemporary design, but churches don't always take the character of the neighborhood they're in regardless. I mean, it is a design feature of its own, a religious assembly.
okay.
I think it's a terrific use for that property. That property is, the owners have tried to do everything in the world with those lots at Front Market as well as Kenwood, and I was very pleased to see that Chabad is taking this and doing it. And as far as that architecture goes, Ligon Flynn would love it. Thank you.
Sir?
How many community meetings did you hold?
We had just the one community meeting that we generally have, and then there was a gap in the timing because we had to go to the DAC, the Design Adjustment Committee, for that design of Linden Avenue in specific. But we've talked with the neighbors, specifically the woman up on Kenwood and the Linden, to assure them that when we do Linden Avenue, we'll make sure that those 2 or 3 people that we talk to, we go ahead and make the curb cuts in the vertical curb as we're designing it. And so other than that, I'm always open to phone calls or emails, and so once we have the meeting, they all have my number, but it was just the single meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. I will now open the public hearing and ask if anyone in the public wishes to speak on item PH2. They'll come forward and give their name for the record. You can just line up behind her. Go ahead, Diana. Come first.
I live about 5 or 6 blocks away from this area, and I have to say I welcome this new installation. I'm a little not crazy about the architecture, but that's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But already there was a preschool. The Chabad had a preschool that entered and exited right on Market Street. So the fact that we're able to put something here that is going to not cause any more traffic on Market Street, and to have neighbors like this is just definitely an asset to our group. So I hope you'll pass this.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Bob Gledhill, and I'm on the outskirts of this map. I'm off of 23rd Street. And my question is, and I've dealt with this in other areas, who is responsible to make sure all these drawings and all these provisions and everything, in fact, are done? And what kind of schedule do they have for construction of heavy equipment? And when are they going to be working? When they're not going to be working? And who is responsible for them? I'm not going over there and getting to it with a bunch of laborers who are just doing what they're told to do. There's got to be someone, a person, perhaps a real estate person who's putting this together, that we can call and we can get answers when and if problems occur or opportunities, depending on how one wants to label it.
I would say, sir,
Yes, I'm sorry.
you could contact me personally at the planning staff, and we will get you in contact with whoever the contractors are to make sure that any issues that arise, that we handle those.
Okay, and I've been through this before. You give me a list of contractors, right? And I got a problem with this. It's not him, it's the other guy.
Right. You would contact the planning staff, and we could be the point of contact and reach out to the developer at that point. And I can get you that information after the meeting. Yes, sir.
I also live at the same house as him on 23rd, and basically, we just want to make sure that, we'll get our cutout to, for our driveway, because I'm not going to park a new car on 23rd. That's just insane. So there. Okay, great.
Okay.
I'm Mary Bland. I'm at, on Kenwood, so my property is perpendicular. And I was in favor at the land use planning meeting for this because it's just been sitting fallow with the past couple of owners, and so it's an eyesore for our community, and I think this will be great. I will say I went to the design committee and I asked about the building and was told it might be brick or have some metal or whatever. They were very non-specific at the meeting. That was one of the questions you had, I guess, for them. So this was my first site at the rendering of the building. But one thing I forgot to mention at the land use, probably because I was nervous, is the parking, because Bob and Christian down there on 23rd, there's nowhere, when the road's being worked on, there's nowhere for them to park except on 23rd, and you just do not park on 23rd. People are coming by, whipping around the corner there, and the police and everybody else. And I had mentioned parking and the driveway inset, because I do park along the alley now, and they have 2 parking places down there, and someone is fixing up the house across from them also. So that is a point of not contention, but just is there going to be any help with paying to put that in on that street, since they are putting in that high curb? I have a brother with muscular dystrophy. I usually bring him in on a ramp perpendicular, not pulled in, because there's just not space on my property to unload him into my property. So
I'm a little bit fuzzy, but are you talking about the curb cuts off of Linden?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Mrs. Wolf has alluded to the fact that they are going to put them in there. They will
Right.
be part of the record. So since this is a conditional district rezoning, which means that whatever they have shared with you and with us and the public, and the rendering that you've seen here tonight, this is what it has to be. And if it alters or changes in any specific way, they have to come back, go through a public process to alert you and to tell you what they are going to change, and then it would come back to the city council for vote if any changes to be made to the plan.
Okay,
So that curb cut will be part of the record.
Is that true for along there? Okay, all right.
So you'll
I've
protect- so
been
you're
unclear.
protected as a
I've addressed
citizen.
the issue before and have not gotten a clear
Okay,
answer.
I just want to make sure that everybody here is talking about the same thing. You need to pull off, you need to go into the Linden Alley and be able to pull off without climbing over a curb. Is that correct? And from what I understood, it's going to have that kind of curb. Am I wrong, Cindy?
Okay, Cindy, could you come up here since we're going to be talking, since we've been talking about this? And I've got a little bit of a feedback loop on this, but
Yes, basically, the neighbors along Linden, which there are only a couple, but they expressed their desire to be able to pull in Linden where they do now on the dirt road and get to the back of their property. And when we curb both sides of Linden as that improvement, rather than having to come back for a city driveway permit, because it will be a city-maintained street, we'll be dedicating it over when it is completed, we can go ahead and design those little curb cuts, just like any other driveway that is done
Good.
for those four specific properties.
I just wanted to make sure I understood, and because I didn't think that everybody was, but it was more for me. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm happy. Thank you.
Ma'am. Anybody else? Okay. Madam Clerk, have you received any additional commentary on this particular item? Are there any additional questions from council? Okay, I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council, and we'll make, and I will also have to read the consistent statement for the record. So we have a motion by Councilman Barnett, second by Councilman Rivenbark. Mr. Barnett, could you please read the consistency statement into the record, please, sir?
I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 2307, 2311, 2315, and 2317 Market Street for O&I Office and Institutional District and CB/CD Community Business Conditional District to O&I CD Office and Institutional District Conditional District for religious assembly use and defined to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan. Based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and define approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would be compatible with the surrounding area and provide an appropriate transition between the Market Street corridor and the adjacent neighborhood.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH3, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Wilmington to rezone property located at 2722 Carolina Beach Road from RB CD Regional Business Conditional District to RB Regional Business District. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Tony Caudle, and I would also note that whoever makes the motion on this particular item must also read a consistency statement. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chambers will overview this item for us as well.
Good evening again. This site is the former VFW located at the corner of Carolina Beach Road and Marion Drive. Includes approximately 1 acre and is currently contains 2 vacant buildings. This image shows the site in the context of the surrounding area along Carolina Beach Road. We have several photos of the subject site. I will say that the airplane has since been moved since these photos have been taken.
How about the gun?
I do not know about that. I know the plane's been moved. I wasn't going slow enough to see the gun.
Just curious. I'm just.
Here's some photos of some adjacent properties. The site is surrounded by commercial and industrial zoning. In 1991, City Council approved a special use district for this property for an assembly use, which was for the VFW. In 2022, that property was sold and existing buildings remained vacant. The comprehensive plan identifies the site as within a suburban commercial retrofit area of opportunity and mixed-use center. The plan calls for infill sites within existing commercial areas to be developed in a manner that's compatible and consistent with the existing development. The proposed zoning would allow for the reuse of an underutilized commercial building and site and would allow redevelopment that is compatible with surrounding commercial area. Staff believes this proposal is consistent with the plan and the request is reasonable in the public interest, and we are recommending approval. And the Planning Commission voted unanimously to also recommend approval of this request. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions, Mr. Chambers? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chambers.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to recognize the applicant. Applicant here? That's okay, I'm sorry. Some feedback here.
For the record, I'm Brandon Basin. I'm one of the co-owners of the building now. We're just asking for it to be rezoned. And for the record, the gun is still there, but it is being removed as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak on item PH3. Seeing none, are there any additional comments, Madam Clerk, that you've received? Okay, any additional comments from council? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Barnett. Councilman Anderson, will you please read a consistency statement for the record, please?
Sure will. I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 2722 Carolina Beach Road from RB CD Regional Business Conditional District to RB Regional Business District, and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would allow for reuse and redevelopment of an existing commercial building and site.
All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our ordinances. Item 01 is an ordinance appropriating fund balance from the general fund totaling $2,100,000 for the settlement of the matter of Funkyard LLC versus the City of Wilmington. This time I'd like to recognize our interim city attorney, Meredith Everhart. Ms. Everhart?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the second reading, and this is just the budget ordinance approving the settlement. Council has already approved the settlement itself, so this is just second reading to approve the appropriation of funds. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Don't have a specific presentation for you tonight.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Everhart? Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
Meredith, in looking at these supporting documents, I guess, and I know these are, well, I don't know that they are, but I assume that the, well, let's see if I'm in the right place here. Hold on, sorry. Yeah, I'll find it. It lists the different finances involved, and it has, I guess, the settlement for what the city did improperly is in that is the $250,000 number, right?
So the 2.1 altogether, so whether or not the city did anything improper hasn't actually been litigated.
Right.
So the 2.1 million, as far as the 1.8 that is in the ordinance, covers everything from the current litigation, so it includes the purchase of the property and anything that we've got included with Mr. Koch. The remaining $250,000, that's additional potential litigation expenses, includes any future litigation that we are essentially cutting off by being able to settle this matter now. So the 1.8 includes the property, but also includes everything having to do with that lawsuit and other things included in the actual settlement. And the 250 is then additional funding that we included as far as the expenses we're going to be able to avoid, we believe, in the future by going ahead and settling this. Does that make sense, sir?
So this breakdown here, I found it finally, sorry. It's page 01-2 with the appropriation amounts. Those are just placeholders, basically. I mean, they don't mean anything.
Yes, sir, that's where the funding is coming from. So it's just to show you where the funding, what accounts the funding is coming from. There are very specific breakdowns as to, in the actual settlement statements as to exact money, and we'll be closing on that on Thursday. So we can get you some additional information in the settlement statements if that would help.
I would really appreciate that and
Yes,
try
sir.
to provide some clarity on the whole situation. Thank you.
And I can give you some of those. I have numbers that I can give you tonight if you have specific questions about what we're going to be paying for property versus anything else.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Okay. So in the settlement statements, the way that it will break down is we have allocated numbers to essentially be $1.4 million for the total value of the property itself, for the real estate, in the settlement statements.
The two properties, the improved.
For all the proproperties at 15.
Not the land, but the improved, the whole package.
Yes, that includes 222 and 226, and also 1536 South Front. And so that will total about 1.4. Out of that, Mr. Koch will actually be paying, or out of that funds will come approximately $500,000 to pay off deeds of trust, to pay off back taxes, to pay off a lot of that. So that is money that he won't be receiving directly. That'll go out directly to pay off all the debts. And those total for deeds of trust and back taxes and those type of things total about $500,000. So out of the 2.1, he will wind up receiving closer to about 1.5 in total after paying all of that off. And that's going to represent us getting getting both of the real estate. There's also $25,000 that he's going to be required to pay for some cleanup activity off of Willard Street. And he is going to be required to have to pay off the taxes and, like I said, all that other information from that. Are there any other specifics as far as numbers that you'd like?
I think we'll just wait and let you flesh that out when you, it's really something I think you have to really see on a sheet similar to
Sure,
that.
and I can send all of those out to you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have definite numbers after the closing on Thursday.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Yes, sir.
So, Meredith, on this sheet, it says 250,000 settlement. Is that what it would cost us to dispute this? What would it cost us to dispute this? Let me just go that way.
So factored into the 2.1 is not only what it would cost us if we were to go to court on the particular lawsuit that we've got, it also includes what it would cost us if we were to try and go to court to recoup all the fines and fees that we also have outstanding with Mr. Koch on other things. Plus, even if we did go to court and we were to lose at court, or even if we were to win, that would just put us back at a point that we'd still be in negotiations with Mr. Koch, because the appeal at this point is not, would be an appeal of the judge's order to say that we have a settlement agreement. So it'd still put us back to square one, and we would still be in litigation with Mr. Koch even if we were to win. But the city has already City Council has already voted to not appeal, and that time for appeal has passed. So that order of the judge is final. And so this ordinance is just to approve the budget appropriation. So there is no avoiding litigation at this point. I mean, we don't have a choice at this point.
So you said it would put us back in litigation with him?
What I'm saying is that the judge has already ruled that we have this settlement agreement and that it's for $2.1 million and what all the terms are. And all that council has to do right now is to approve the budget ordinance. That time for appeal has already passed. And so council has already voted at your February meeting to comply with the settlement. And so this is just a second reading on a budget ordinance to appropriate the funds for a settlement that council has already agreed to. So there's no option to go back and say we're going to appeal at this point.
Okay, but you still didn't answer my question. What would it cost us? If we were able to, what would it cost us? Compared to $2.1 million, what would it cost us?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But not $2.1 million.
Not in legal fees, $2.1 million, but we could still wind up paying $2.1 million. Yes, sir.
Never mind, Meredith.
All right. All in favor of that ordinance, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? 6 to 1. Okay. Brings us to our next item of business, which is item O2, which is an ordinance making a supplemental appropriation to the general fund in the amount of $2,039 collected from Summer One LLC for their use of the Davis Center for Filming and Staging. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community Services Director Amy Beatty will overview this item. Let me provide a moment of clarification. We believe that your feedback that you're getting in your mic is a result of the mic at the podium being turned up so loud so that we can catch folks' voices. We've toned that down, so we're going to ask the folks at the podium to speak clearly and closely to the mic, please.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and councils. How does this sound? Okay. The production company Summer One LLC filmed at the Davis Community Center for 2 days in November of 2022 for the production of The Summer I Turned Pretty, requiring the center hours for the public to be altered during those days of filming. In return, the city received $2,039 for the use of the facility. This ordinance would appropriate those funds to be used to spend on supplies for the summer camp program at the Davis Center and to purchase new lobby furniture. I'll try and answer any questions that you have.
Any question for Ms. Beatty? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, seconded by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Barnett, seconded by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. It brings us to our next item, which is item O3A, which is an ordinance which is accompanied by O3B, which is a resolution. So we'll take them, I'll read them together so we can vote on them together. So item O3A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $282,875 for the tree mitigation plantings projects in the Capital Parks and Recreation Fund for reimbursement of zoning and subdivision fees and donations for tree mitigation purposes. And then item O3B is the resolution authorizing our city manager to enter into a contract with Environmental Tree and Design Incorporated in the amount of $182,875 to relocate 5 live oak trees. This time I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Beatty will overview these two items for us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. As the mayor indicated, I'll overview these items together. The city currently has $508,910 in tree mitigation funds collected from developers. These funds are restricted for use by the city for tree plantings and for equipment associated with tree planting exclusively. This ordinance would appropriate $100,000 of tree mitigation funds for new tree plantings in city right-of-ways throughout the city this spring at locations yet to be determined. And it would also appropriate $182,875,000 to relocate 5 mature live oak trees in the median of South 17th Street. The Barclay West development is nearing construction on the next phase of development and is required by a traffic impact analysis. A new intersection and traffic signal must be installed at 17th Street and Gallery Park Drive. This will require a medium break, which in turn requires the removal of the 5 live oak trees. With the passage of this ordinance and the accompanying resolution, the city would enter into a contract with Environmental Tree Design Services to relocate the trees elsewhere in the South 17th Street median. I'll try and answer any questions that you have.
So, Mr. Waddell?
Yeah, I've had some taxpayers reach out just regarding this, concerning the price for the 5 trees, and my response has been these large commercial spades that are required to kind of ensure, or at the best of our ability, ensure a successful movement and replanting of the trees are, I mean, they're massive pieces of equipment that are no doubt expensive to rent, or could you or someone just kind of give us some clarification on that and make sure I'm not steering them the wrong way with that explanation?
No, I would say that's very accurate. The city does not own equipment that would enable the city to internally remove these trees, so it does have to go out to a contractor. These are very mature live oak trees. The work is warranted for 18 months, and for comparison, this same company relocated the live oak on Market Street that was associated with the Publix development a few years ago, and this cost is actually, we were actually very surprised to see how low this cost was compared to the work associated with that tree.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Anderson?
That was a lot bigger tree, but we were still expecting, based on the cost of that one tree, for this to be more expensive.
Amy, do you have a ballpark on how much our average year we get in these payment in lieu fees?
I can't, I don't have that. I know our planning staff is still here. I don't know if they can. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on the economy and how much
Sure,
development
but
is occurring
we
at
hadn't
a
had a real
time.
slowdown in a while.
We've not had a real slowdown in a while. So again, what's in the bank right now is
Well, I'd
over
be curious
$500,000.
at some point if we could
Yeah,
get that.
we haven't utilized these funds in recent memory, so I'd say that's a buildup of a good number of years.
Okay.
If anybody else here can respond to that more specifically, I would invite them to.
Well, Amy, if you can answer this one, Brian is probably more suited for it. I think he's hiding over there. I mean, I would assume the developer of Barclay West Point, they paid pretty handsomely into this, with all their development around there, into this fund.
Oh, right, and obviously they are responsible for incurring the costs for making the traffic improvements themselves. But our code just does not require them to pay for any relocation of trees. So if that's what the city chooses to do, the city must pay for that.
Understood, but I was just trying to clarify. I don't know if Brian could answer that. I mean, they've certainly cut down a lot. I know some of those are not the right classification of tree or what have you, but they've contributed to this fund handsomely, I would think.
Oh, I would speculate that, yes, sir, they have.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned that the trees are insured for 18 months once they move them. Did I hear that? Or
Yeah, there's an 18-month warranty period, so if the trees fail to thrive within those 18 months after the replanting, then the contractor would have to come back in and do a replanting of a similar size tree.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. What are the wishes of the council in respect to the ordinance? We'll start with the ordinance first. We have a motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilman Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Barnett, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. And then it brings us to item 03B, which is the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into the contract with Environmental Tree Design for $182,875 to relocate the 5 live oaks. What are the wishes of council in respect to that? We have a motion by Councilman Barnett, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our resolutions. Item R1 is a resolution amending the Wilmington City Council's Rules of Order, and at this time I'd like to recognize our interim city attorney, Meredith Everhart. Ms. Everhart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This matter was continued from your second January meeting to allow council to have more time to think about these rules, and this does come to you from your governance committee for your consideration after consultation with both the city attorney's office and the city manager's office, but they are for you to discuss, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts, comments? Mr. Spears?
My thoughts still remain the same as far as the motive for bringing about these changes, and we didn't even, we just touched the surface on what we discussed in the last meeting where we had this agenda item. There are definitely more concerns. I left my marked up packet at home when I was leaving the house, but there is a rule about town hall meetings and the allocation of resources and things of those natures, and as I stated previously, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm the only council member that's had a town hall meeting. I've had a town hall meeting with Councilmember Barnett, and I've also had a town meeting with you, Mr. Mayor. We've conducted online town hall meetings because the community has asked for these things, and again, it was us being innovative about how we conducted city business. There was not an overextension or an exhaustion of resources that we used. I want to say I did most of the heavy lifting as it relates to advertising and putting it together. Where we used 2 laptops, Mr. Barnett, you and I, where did we use phones? I don't think we were even in the same place. So I just, without getting too long drawn out, I don't see the need. I don't see the need for any of it. If someone can point out to me where there has been a need to change anything, where there's some potential danger, where there has been a threat of something going wrong with how we've conducted business up until this came about, then maybe I'd change my mind. But as far as I can see right now, I don't see it. I don't see the need for it.
Anybody else?
With that, has there been extended use of staff for like town hall meetings or anything like that?
No, sir, there has not been extended use of staff for town hall meetings. The reason that we put that in place was because the topic came up at an interval where we, we're not amending the council's rules of order. And so what we were trying to do was put a situation in place where council members could go out and solicit input on their own, either with staff or without staff, and just to make sure it didn't burden the staff in the case of all 7 of you wanting to do 4 meetings apiece. And so what we tried to do was put some parameters around that would recognize the outreach of the council members supported by the staff and unsupported by the staff. It has not, I do not recall that it's been used since it was put in place.
Okay. So it was in place before?
No, sir. We put this in place as a result of the ongoing meetings that Councilman Spears had with yourself and with the mayor, and just to make sure that we didn't overextend staff in terms of support for those kinds of meetings.
Okay. Mr. Waddell? Or
ahead,
Mr. Anderson?
You know, with the risk of belaboring the points that we, had significant discussion on a couple of weeks ago, or I guess about a month ago, I still stand by what I thought was a reasonable compromise, and with respect to two items, I do think the governance committee did a good job in looking to the future and putting policies and procedures in place for this council and future councils until they wish to amend them. So I'm going to offer a substitute motion that is similar, if not exactly the same as what I believe I offered last time. And that's I move to approve the resolution to amend the rules of order for council as proposed with the following changes. Rule 16, Section 2, change to council member participation shall be in person for all regular meetings and closed sessions except at exceptional need. And then Rule 4, Section 3, the city manager's office shall be responsible for the coordination of the clergy who will perform non-sectarian invocation and who will be chosen whenever possible from the current chaplains at either the Wilmington Police Department or the Wilmington Fire Department. In the event there's not a chaplain available, city manager may solicit participation from any member of the clergy who resides in or is employed in Wilmington. In the event there's no clergy available at that time of the meeting, the invocation shall be performed by a member of council or staff designated by the presiding official.
Sir, Mr. Anderson?
This discussion real quick. On the, just going back to the prior conversation, as I remember it, and Margaret, you'll have Charlie Young, your memory supports me. Don't say anything, but if it's wrong, correct me. We didn't, that came from staff. We did that whole piece about the meetings. That was, and we didn't really, if we doctored it, I don't remember doctoring it. So that didn't come, it came through the committee, it didn't come from the committee, so to speak. I guess my question about those, and it really involves everyone, not necessarily, I guess I would clarify, Luke, with there was some discussion about closed sessions and when, and the mayor, I think, suggested we have them
I would
on council meeting evenings.
My motion would be that, and I don't know if that's appropriate to include in this motion, but that we would keep closed sessions as they are done currently, following a Monday agenda briefing. And if there's a way for the staff to make sure that there's appropriate time for anyone who may not be able to make it in person, I'd be open to those suggestions.
I don't think that that's something that has to be included in your actual rules. That's something that council can decide on from meeting to meeting. What I can say is that if council does want to have an agenda, a closed session following a Monday morning meeting, we generally know on staff by Thursday afternoon if we're going to be asking you for a closed session. And so we can certainly make more of an effort to let council know ahead of time, and that way you can make a decision about whether or not that makes a difference in whether or not you're going to be able to be there if you want to have it on a Monday. We can certainly do that. And also, I did talk to Councilman Waddell this afternoon about his desired revisions, and I went ahead and made a red line version and drafted something to that effect. Mr. Mayor, if you would like for me to hand that out so that council can see what that would look like in writing, I'd be glad to do that now.
Please do. Anything tonight that I'm going to be voting on tonight.
Well, if I could just finish where I was there, I guess we, as a committee, I don't know if it was the timing or maybe our experiences over the years, but we worked hard to try to come up with a way. If you notice that if it gets to midnight, we kind of like, are we doing a good job for our citizens at that point? Should we shut it down? We tried to do things to make the meetings not super long. So I guess I would just, I don't know if that needs to go into the policy, but if we're going to have a closed session on Tuesday business meeting day, I'd love to see us try to do it beforehand, like a 5 o'clock or something. I mean, rather than 11 o'clock or 11:30 or 12 o'clock. So, I said if we're going to, that was what was suggested last time. I'm all for what Luke says, leave it the way it is. But if we're going to do them on Tuesdays, we ought to do it while we're fresh.
I'm almost, not almost, I kind of, not kind of, I agree with Councilman Rivenbark that if, you know, we're going to vote on this tonight, I mean, I'd almost prefer that we table it another, and do it at the next regular meeting, because this is not anything that's pressing, is it? Is it time sensitive? Do we have to do it like right now?
So Councilmember Barnett, my understanding is that Councilmember Waddell made a substitute motion, and this is his substitute motion. So it is required to be dealt with tonight in some form or fashion. So the chair does need to determine if there's a second and take a vote on the substitute motion.
Well, so the substitute motion, so everybody has it, is where the red line is.
Yes, sir. So
Under
the red lines,
under Rule 4 and Rule 16.
so that Rule 4 is on page 3. And then Rule 16 begins on page 16 and is included on pages 16 and 17.
Straightforward motion, but nobody
to
wishes
me,
to second, we can move on.
It's Mr. Mayor.
I'll second it.
Wait a minute.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, for clarity, I think it's not a substitute motion, but a motion with the substitute of an amendment, because there was never a motion on the floor. And I think I heard Councilman Rivenbark seconded that motion.
I did.
Oh, Neil, okay, thank you.
So we do have a motion on the floor by Mr. Waddell, seconded by Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, but I'm not, I got some further discussion.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
And just to be clear, all of the things in respect to the ruling or is here. The changes that I guess Mr. Waddell has alluded to are the ones dealing with the chaplain. Is that correct, Mr. Waddell?
That's Rule 4, Section 3.
Okay.
And the other is Rule 16, Section 2, regarding council member participation being in person for all regular meetings, which is our Tuesday night meetings, and for closed sessions, except at exceptional need.
And everything else, Mr. Mayor, is the same as what you received previously. So this is the amended packet with everything else that you received back in January, but those two changes from January to now.
And so if somebody wants to participate on the agenda briefing by Zoom, it's still available.
That's my understanding. It's still available. It should be an exceptional need, and then any council member could call.
So for agenda briefings, budget meetings, it says that it's to be used instead of for exceptional need for those types of meetings, it says to be used sparingly. The only ones where you have to show exceptional need are the semi-monthly business meetings like this and closed sessions. Those require exceptional need. The others, it just says that council members are generally expected to be here in person and to use that sparingly. So there's no special steps you have to take for any of those other meetings. It's just an admonishment to council members that you're expected to generally be here for all the other meetings.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say that everyone hadn't gone through this. If Councilman Waddell can only talk about Rule 4 and Rule 16, but can't address the town hall meetings or, well, like I said, I left my mark when home. There's a lot of homework that hadn't been done here by most of this council. And we're just trying to go forward with something, acting blindly as if this is just something that came about, and it's not. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be transparent with the public. Let's be transparent about what we're doing. Let's be transparent that someone or there are a group of us that are meeting to ostracize someone else that's on this council. And you do this every single time. And you put on this face as like, oh, I'm harmless, I'm for the good of the people, and you're not. You're full of it. You're full of it. You are absolutely full of it every single time. And you can't tell him what to tell me. If you want to tell me something, you tell me, coward.
I don't care if you never come to
Hey, don't interrupt me. I'm talking.
One
Shut
at a
up.
time, one at a
I'm
time,
talking.
one at a time, one
Yeah.
at a time, please. Please.
You want to
please,
get angry
please.
about it?
Please,
What you gonna do?
Please.
Yeah, you need to shut up. That's what you need to do. I'm talking.
Come on.
Yeah, don't rush me. I move when I want to move. And this is it. This is the same crap that you do together as a cohort. For what? You're not benefiting anybody by doing this. This is not to the benefit of Wilmingtonians for the stuff that you come up here and do continuously. But you put on this front like you're for the promotion or the movement, forward movement of the city of Wilmington, and you are not. Quit pretending. I don't have to pretend. I am exactly who I say I am. And I can be whoever you want me to be, Charles.
Okay. All right. We have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Waddell, seconded by Councilmember Anderson. Any further discussion?
Yeah. The section 3. I understand that you're going to pick the chaplains from the police department or the fire department. Those are the only persons that we're using?
Well, I may be out for clarification. I think it was in order to basically provide some policy that streamlined utilizing our current city chaplains for both the police department and the fire department, which I felt was reasonable. And I came to that conclusion after reading what we had in front of us over the last month and making what I thought was a reasonable compromise, and then taking it to the city attorney, which is certainly my right as a representative on the city council. And then to have a policy, if neither of those fire department or police department chaplains are readily available, that it moves to go into our clergy within the community. And if no one responds to that, then it would move to a member of council, I think, or staff as appointed by the presiding officer, which I would assume be the mayor.
Okay. Is that, because the present, the way we were doing it before was Penny was picking the ministers, correct? Is this a task that we want to give to the city manager? Is this like another thing we want to put on his plate?
I think this, my recommendation was to take things off of everybody's plate. You just have a standard policy and procedure that allows for the chaplains that we have that are paid for by the taxpayer to be here on a Tuesday evening and say a prayer and basically streamline the whole operation.
Okay. But it says the city manager's office shall be responsible for. So that means that he's responsible for
Yes.
drafting those, getting those individuals, correct? Okay, and my question is, with all the other stuff that you have to do, is that one more thing that we'd like to put on your plate? I mean, that, I know you'll do whatever we ask you to do, but I'm thinking that there are more important things that he might need to be doing. That's all.
I don't think there's respectfully anything more important than God.
Duh. Okay, we'll buy that. But I'm just saying, because we get as a clergyman, okay, I will get a letter from both the city as well as the county saying, can you sign up and take a date, and I don't know how. I guess that's probably how we do it here. And I was just when I saw it given into him, I just thought that maybe that's just something else that is on his plate that maybe we could give to someone else.
Which is why I wanted to streamline it by utilizing current city staff. I know my thought process is that 9 times out of 10, our chaplains at the fire department at the city of Wilmington will be happy to come here and give the invocation.
We do use them though, don't we? Haven't we used police and fire chaplains? We have used them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And just for clarification for all of council, there are a total between police and fire of 15 chaplains. So there are 7 at fire and 8 at police. And so there is a good number of them, and I have spoken to both Chief Mason and Chief Williams today and asked them if they were amenable if that motion was made, and they both indicated that they'd be happy to have their staff do that.
If I may add, since the clerk is the one that normally has handled this, we have never had a fire chaplain agree to serve to do invocation. It's always been Wilmington PD. The chief has assigned Ron Evans, who oversees the chaplains, and while Meredith may say they have 17 or whatever, they really only have 3 or 4 that's able to do the invocation. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And also, and I will respect whatever council decides to do with this process, it's fine. But please be reminded that we have ministers from the community, a diverse community, signed up already. So when you agree to do this, then I would just only ask the manager or someone send them a letter and thank them, so we'll have to remove them from the schedule.
Okay. Would we not maybe complete the schedule, or do we, could we not complete the schedule and then just start it, I guess?
That's fine. Sure. That makes sense. Clint.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
On the schedule in the docket, just let them finish it out.
Okay.
But my question is, Madam Clerk, how many, you said there are only 3 available? So none of the others have signed up?
Exactly, and I've been doing this for years, but they only have 3 that are committed. Now, council said years ago, we really want to use our chaplains, and we have really tried to use our chaplains. But again, you don't have them on payroll. Most of them are volunteers.
Okay. So just more BS, huh? Oh, you can't answer that. Don't you answer that.
Okay.
I'll answer it for you. Just more crap.
All right. Anybody else? All right. We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Anderson. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? I do. Passes 5-2. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item R2, which is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into amendment number 1 of the security services contract for downtown facilities with Safety and Security Services Incorporated for $81,199.20. This time I'd like to recognize City Manager Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy City Manager Thomas Moten will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Tonight we ask that you extend the security guard services agreement through the end of the fiscal year, as well as increase the areas of the coverage so that we have overnight coverage on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights through the end of the fiscal year. Prior to the end of the fiscal year, we will go out to bid, get competitive procurement proposals from security firms, and bring them back to you. We believe it's been effective use of the city's funds to add additional auxiliary security services during the daytime. As you know, the city manager executed a contract late last fall, and we also have a partner in sharing the cost, which is the CFPUA staff at 305 Chestnut Street. I'll be happy to answer the questions if you have them at this time.
Are there any questions for Tom? Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Anderson.
Not so much a question. It goes, a little bit goes back to our ARPA conversation earlier. We do just need to be kind of careful with, when this ARPA money goes away, we've now have new services that people expect, and then that money's got to come from taxes. So you just
Absolutely.
have to be, hope we're cognizant of that as we don't get out over our skis too much, and all of a sudden we have to, well, we can't do that anymore. So I want to use the funds. Don't hear me wrong. Just I think that's something we need to be cognizant of.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Tom. What are the wishes of council in respect to the item?
Offer motion.
We have a motion by Councilman Barnett.
Second.
Second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item R3, which is a resolution in support of allowing Carolina Beach, and Wrightsville Beach to use traditional sand sources for beach renourishment. And I'd like to recognize Councilmember Waddell, who is a member of the Ports and Waterway Commission. Mr. Waddell?
I'll be brief, but just give a background on why this is coming to the table. Similar resolution passed at New Hanover County Commission meeting, I believe, last night. I serve on the Ports, Waterway, and Beach Commission as the city appointee. Since the 1960s, Wrightsville Beach has dredged sand from Masonboro Inlet every 3 years in their beach renourishment efforts. But in 2021, the U.S. Department of Interior began enforcing CBRA zones, which prohibited sand from being taken from those zones, which meant that Masonboro Inlet sand that had been used for more than 50 years for beach renourishment could no longer be used, left local officials, residents, and Army Corps engineers scrambling to find a feasible and compatible source in short order. The federally designated borrow site that was implemented by the federal government for Wrightsville Beach is now in the Atlantic Ocean and is adjacent to an area of a remnant of an artificial reef that was created in the 1970s, which consists of hundreds of thousands of tires and metal, resulting in a potentially compromised borrow site that significantly increased the cost and would have significant potential harm to the environment. So to address that issue, Congressman David Rouser introduced Bill H.R. 524 in the U.S. House of Representatives earlier this year. This bill creates an exemption to the restriction on the use of federal funds for borrow sites that were adversely affecting Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach. Specifically, H.R. 524 states that restrictions shall not apply to funds to use a borrow site located within the system if it has been in use as a borrow site by a coastal storm risk management project for more than 15 years, which we would. The Masonboro Inlet and Carolina Beach Inlet would be eligible for this exemption, allowing the projects to return to successful, cost-effective, proven modeling that provides healthy coastal infrastructure for decades. Of course, the City of Wilmington recognizes the importance of supporting our coastal preservation, renourishment, sustainability, and resiliency, and understands that consistent beach renourishment plays a role in limiting damage that could be caused by major storms, along with the economic impacts we enjoy because of our surrounding beaches. For that reason, I move that council support this resolution, expressing Wilmington's support of H.R. 524.
That's a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. This concludes our regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city attorney?
No, sir.
City manager?
No, sir.
Madam Clerk? Mr. Spears, will start to my left.
Yes, sir. I just want to say how proud I am to work with the descendants of Alfred Waddell and Charlie Rivenbark and the undercover racist Margaret Haynes. Oh, and Neil Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Anderson?
A couple things. I meant to bring them up last time and forgot, but reading about some of the wells down in, I guess, off Carolina Beach Road brought it back to me. We have a train derailment in Ohio, and I'm not making any light of that, that's for sure, but it's amazing how a big plume will get the EPA's attention, and a 40-year leak in the river won't. It's like it needs to burn or make national news. And you have that the head of the EPA is the exact guy that stood in front of us in here and told us he was going to help us. And I don't know what we built a plant for, $60-some million. And now we've got all these communities that need to hook up, and that's going to continue to cost us money. So it's sad that it takes that kind of, it's just got to look good on TV in order to really get their attention, rather than something that's just as, causing just as much dangerous health effects. And I also think about our train, moving our train tracks that go through our city. I mean, I don't know what's on all those trains, but I'm sure it's not all safe, and it's rolling right through here. So it begs for pushing as hard as we are and harder to get it out of our residential areas and our business areas. Thank you.
Mr. Rivenbark? Mayor Pro Tem? Mr. Barnett?
Just a couple things that are happening in the community that I think I'd like to just make people aware of. On the 16th, the communities and schools will have their breakfast, and they do a lot of work with the kids, and that's a program that's happening on the 16th. Then on the 23rd, Smart Start will have their breakfast for children's champions, and that will be at the Cape Fear Community College, and that's at 7:30. Just encourage people to continue to support programs like that and nonprofits, things that are doing that, because it takes all of us to help make our city a better place to live. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Waddell? Okay. With that, thank you for taking an interest in government. We stand adjourned.